so early today. Well done. Oh, you're catching me off guard. I have this plan every single week to basically vamp until everyone shows up, which is usually 2 minutes in. But since you're all ready, I guess I'll just quickly tell you that I played pickleball for the first time this past week, and it was awesome. So jump in the comments, tell me where you're calling from, tell me who you're with, but tell me if you played pickleball before and whether it was fun or whether it was very treacherous on your legs like it was mine. And thanks for joining me for another week of fall semester wine school. I'm going to get wine open and start drinking immediately because I've had a really long week and I need a glass of wine. So today you should have the William Chris Vineyards 2019 Mourvèdre from the Texas High Plains. So go ahead and open this up and get some wine in the glass. Hi, Kelly from Buddha. Thanks for joining. Never played pickleball. All right. Go find a place to play pickleball. It's like tennis with a bunch of weird moves. And honestly, we started playing the game before we actually knew the rules. So it was extra exciting for us. Hi, Kira. Hi, John. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So before we get into the material tonight, before I start sipping on the wine, I have to let y'all know, yes, we're drinking this wine, but also if you have 3 glasses and if you have a decanter, I'm going to do an exercise and y'all are welcome to do it along with me. If you don't have that stuff, no worries. Just sip along and do this exercise sometimes later. I like to do this with different wines because it changes every single time I do it. This is an exercise that we did last year with Summer Sippin' with this same wine, except it was the 2018 vintage. So we are reviving it. And we're going to have a nice little discussion about decanting today. That is the theme. There were a couple of questions that were popped in the comments after I hopped off last time. And so I'm going to take time to answer those for everybody. The first one was from Tracy. And Tracy asked, do you need to pump the air out of a wine before you put it in the fridge? So I don't know how many people may have an air pump. That's not a tool that I have because my question to that is always, and I should do more experimenting with the air pump to see if it's valuable because I've heard it is valuable for some people. But to me, if there's not oxygen in your bottle, what is remaining in the bottle out after you've pumped out the oxygen? That being said, I've heard that pumping the air out of a bottle of wine after you've drank a couple of glasses or you've drank half the bottle and you just can't have any more because you've already had 3 bottles or something, pumping the air out can potentially extend the aging it can extend the time that you can continue drinking the wine by 1 or 2 days. So potentially you could hold your wine for 3 or 4 days, maybe 5 days instead of the recommended 2 to 3 days remaining open. And it's worth pointing out that once you have opened a bottle of wine and you're putting it in the fridge, you should not be laying it down like this because there is way more oxygen in touch with your wine this way than this way, where you just have this surface area touching the oxygen. Does that make sense? Stand your wine upright after you've opened it to put it in the fridge or even on the counter if you're going to store it for longer. But if you're storing your wine and you haven't opened it, you always put it on its side. The second question we had, and Tracy, I hope that answered your question and maybe some of your questions that you didn't ask. The second question I got from Julie. Julie said, what are the best wines to drink without food? Because we talk so much about food and wine pairing. She wants to know, what do you drink without food? And that is a wonderful question. There are certain producers that make their wine just to have it ready so that when you pop the bottle open, you don't need to pair it with anything. And I would say that Lost Draw Cellars has a lot of those wines. That Cinsault that we had last week, it doesn't need food in order to balance it. And then other producers are making their wine that are inherently out of balance, meaning they're highly tannic or they are pretty tart when you first drink it, and they need a good decanting or they need something salty or fatty to balance that wine out. And it potentially makes that food pairing even more alive. So finding a producer that makes those wines that are meant to drink without food, like Lost Straw Cellars. You can always pair those wines with food, but they're made in a way to come out balanced. So to answer your question, there is no easy way to handle that question. It's your most balanced wines that are going to be able to drink without food, because ultimately food is changing something in the wine in order to get something appealing out of it. But there are some wines out there that are balanced in the way that they are. They're not too tart, they're not too alcoholic, they're not too tannic. They are balanced in their own right. And good examples of that would be a lot of wines that are at that 13% alcohol realm. They can typically be pretty balanced between tannin and alcohol and acidity, but that is very general. I just typically think of medium-bodied wines as already balanced. I think of low alcohol wines as typically being the most food friendly, because your low alcohol wines will have less sugar in them, more acidity, and that tartness begs for food. And then your really full-bodied wines tend to be higher alcohol, and those wines are best with a really, really hearty piece of meat, like a big steak with a big like fat component to it, honestly. But that is all general. That's a really, really good question. And today we're going to build on how to balance your wines with decanting. So if you ever taste a wine that seems like it needs something, if it's super tannic or if it's super tart, or if you're kind of like, well, this wine is okay, but I wish it was a little more of this or that, we're going to talk about why decanting can be the thing that you do to the wine to help it become balanced in its own right. And those are great wines that you don't need to pair with food. So I'm going to continue answering that question, Julie. This was just the preface of it. I have a lot of action in the comments, so let me see what y'all are saying. Hi, Brenda, Tracy. Good. I'm glad I answered your question. Keep throwing your questions in the comments. I have obviously my computer right in front of me, and I can see everything that y'all are asking. If I read any more comments now without putting wine in the glass, it's never going to happen. I apologize. If anyone out there wants to volunteer to be the person who reminds me to drink during this, I'm open for it. Oh, Mourvèdre, smoky and lovely. Catherine joining from North Carolina. Oh, you're vacationing. Cool, because you're usually in San Antonio with me. Alta Fraser. You're in Bordeaux? Oh my gosh, we're all very, very jealous of you. Oh, that's awesome. Grab a bottle of Bordeaux or whatever you have there and pop it open. Drink something with us and tell me how it is, what you're drinking. Mike, awesome. More wine, food or no food. That is a great motto to live by. I believe it. And Ginger, hi, welcome. I don't think I've seen you on here before, so welcome to Fall Semester Wine School. All right, let's jump into today's discussion about decanting. So last week we spoke about wine chemistry. So flavor compounds, how they come into a grape, what flavor compounds are associated with different grape varieties. And then we talked about oxygen and how that affects the wine after the flavor compounds have come into the grape and eventually come into the wine that we're drinking. So the ways we discussed this happening, and if anything stood out last week that you want to pop in the comments, please do. The way we talked about flavor compounds coming into grapes was there are different grape varieties out there, like Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Noir, Mourvèdre is one of them. Cinsault that we drank last week is one of them as well. Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, there are many, many. Each grape variety has been domesticated to repeat certain characteristics. And these are flavor compounds, but also pigment levels, tannin levels, acidity levels, ability to grow in certain climates better than other places. But the flavor compounds that are associated with a grape variety are what we should expect to be in the final wine if we don't mess it up in the winemaking process. And to give you an example of this, Mourvèdre. Mourvèdre is known for being black fruited, smoky or edgy in some other way, having natural smoky notes or cedar notes to it, and then having notes of violets. That is all associated with the grape variety, no matter where it grows around the world. And that will generally be what you get when you pick up a Mourvèdre. Now, the other way that we talked about flavor compounds coming into a wine is through the nutrients in the ground and what the nutrients are being shared with in that area. So for instance, the Texas High Plains is a large area. It's 8 million acres up near the Texas Panhandle, west of where I am now. And that area is known for also growing things like tons of other agriculture, flowers, cotton, alfalfa. There is squash and watermelon. There's tons of stuff growing up there. And so we can assume that the nutrients that these grapes shared with the other agriculture in the area potentially cause this grape to taste a little bit like everything else. So if you get maybe a cotton blossom, or I get hay notes in some of the white wines from the Texas High Plains. Chris Vineyards, the co-founder of William Chris Wine Company and William Chris Vineyards, often says desert sage is what he smells and tastes in Texas High Plains wines. And guess what you find in the Texas High Plains? Tons of desert sage. So smell your wine, see if you can catch that sage. If you don't worry. We're going to talk about why you may smell desert sage once we've decanted this wine a couple times, and you may find it then. Swirling the glass may help. It's a really delicate aroma, desert sage, and it won't necessarily present itself in every single Texas High Plains wines, but what we talked about last week is that there's the potential that that could happen. And finally, we talked about oxygen, and that's where we're going to continue our discussion for today. So what does oxygen do to wine? And I will tell you after we take a sip of this wine and talk a little bit about it. Tell me what you're getting from this wine, guys. I want to know. Thanks, Mike. You have volunteered to be my wine watcher. Oh, this is a big wine. If anyone had the 2018 or 2017 versions of this wine, it used to be a lot more medium bodied. It is full bodied. It's rich. It's unctuous, and it's super like chocolate and smoke with blackberry jam. At least that's what I'm getting. What are y'all getting from this wine? Hi, Nathan. Good to see you. Mark and Mary. Good to see y'all. Okay, so Tabitha has asked a question. She was told to store the bottle upside down and unopened. Is that not correct? That is a really good question. And we're going to talk about wine storage later on in this series. So definitely stay tuned for that. But I'll give you a quick answer. Your goal is to store your wine this way at a consistent temperature that is not above 70 degrees about. The reason you want to store it this way is because this is the best way for the cork to stay wet, which is probably why you've been told to store it upside down, because you need the cork to be wet. If you store your wine like this, there's a little gap here and the cork will dry out, and it will eventually flaw the wine. The cork will break down and allow too much oxygen in. So upside down is not incorrect, but if you're storing this, especially for a long time, storing it this way allows for the wine to evenly age. And I will continue that discussion with y'all another time, because there's a lot more to that discussion. There's a reason why, but horizontally will age your wine more evenly long-term, theoretically. Also, interesting, this shoulder here, the shoulders of the wine are made to catch sediment. And so if you're storing your wine like this for, say, 10 years, your bottle will throw sediment inside. It's the tannin and color binding together, and it'll catch in this shoulder. But if you stored your wine like this, all the sediment is here. And when you turn it upside down to open it, all the sediment will mix into the wine and be very, very difficult to catch. But if you are not storing your wine for longer than a couple years, it's not that big a deal. You won't get sediment off that wine yet. I hope that answered your question, Tabitha. Keith, yes, I can see the questions coming from YouTube, but thank you for catching that. All right. I don't see anyone talking about this wine. I guess you're enjoying it so much that you don't even have time to talk about it. That's okay. Let's continue on with our discussion, and then we'll do an exercise together. This wine is already opening up. At first, it was really smoky and chocolatey, and now do you get that really pure cherry note? Yeah, there's a perfectly ripe cherry in there, but it was hard to see at first. This is a wonderful sign that your wine needs to be in oxygen. If you have a wine in your glass, you've opened it, you've smelled it, and 10 minutes later, you're smelling it and you're not finding anything new and it hasn't changed, you do not need to decant that wine because it's already shown that being in contact with oxygen won't change the wine. If you shake up that wine a lot, the oxygen will likely kill the wine, and so decanting would not be recommended. However, I've spent just 5 minutes with this wine. It's already changing. I've noticed something new in the wine that I didn't notice before. And now I know, hey, I should pull out a decanter and try and decant the rest of this wine. But why? Because oxygen is pulling at the flavor compounds in this wine. They're chemical compounds. It's pulling them up into the glass and breaking them down so that they can start to transform. This is when the really delicate aromas can finally show themselves. Delicate aromas are really suppressed in a wine until you add oxygen to it. And it's with that oxygen that we can really capture those. What that also means is that you have to protect the delicate aromas. So decanting is not a one-size-fits-all thing. You have to tailor your decanting experience to the wine. And we'll talk about how to do that. All right, Mike, I'm listening to you. Lynette's drinking the 2019 La Pradera blend. How awesome is that wine? I'm all about that wine. And that's a wine when we first bottled it, it was really, really tart. And that's what we got from it. It was really hard to get anything else from that wine. And now that it's been in bottle for 8 months or a year or so, it has changed so much. And I think that's probably the same thing that happened with this Mourvèdre. And very honestly, William Chris Wines will bottle their wines and they will change month to month to month to month because William Chris works in a very protected winemaking style. So they protect their wine from oxygen in the winemaking process so that when you take William Chris wines home and you add a lot of oxygen, the wine just totally opens and blossoms, which means we recommend decanting almost every William Chris wine. Crystal, yes, Mourvèdre is a type of grape. It is, I think we are the second largest producer of Mourvèdre in the US. It's a grape that was born in France. I'm sorry, it was born in Spain. It was known as Monastrell. And then the Southern French decided to start working with the grape and use it a lot in blends. And then it came over to America. And it does really, really well in warm climates, which is what we're in Texas. So it is very much a heat-loving grape variety. It survives frost really well as well. And it has lovely chocolatey, smoky blackberry flavor. Gosh, there's something that's trying to get at my wine. Hope you enjoy it. John, great question about aerating. So how does an aerating pour compare to decanting? They are theoretically doing the same thing. They are inviting oxygen into the wine. But today I will tell you why I prefer decanting over an aerator. And then you can decide for yourself whether you prefer one or the other. But what I like about decanting is that I can control the amount of oxygen and the time it takes to get that much oxygen with a decanter. And this is where our discussion for today starts. So there's no one-size-fits-all solution to decanting. And this vessel, the decanter, was made in different sizes so that you can treat the wine as you will. After you've assessed it, and I've said this wine needs a lot of oxygen, but I want to protect the delicate flavors, I can decide what vessel would be best. So the reason I might use this vessel is because I'm not drinking a lot of the wine, and I don't want that much oxygen in contact with the wine. It has a very small bowl at the bottom. Not much oxygen is going to get in contact with the wine here unless I only fill the decanter up this much. If I fill the decanter up this much, only the top part of the wine is being touched by oxygen, and I can't really swirl it. So this is something I'll use for white wine as well. If I have a really bold white wine and I just want it to get a little bit of air, I'll pour it in this. But I've already said this wine has changed a lot, and I want to encourage that. I want the wine to soften out. I want to really discover that cherry note. I want to find the sage that I know is in there. I want to see if the wine is floral. I'm going to choose this decanter, which has a very, very wide bowl. And then there are many other decanters and sizes in addition to this. There are some that have smaller bowl than this. There are some that are very large and tall, invite tons and tons of oxygen. But typically, the wines that I like to drink, they are restrained. I'm not a high alcohol, really bold wine type of person. And to give you an example, if I was drinking a Tannat, I would grab my massive decanter because I know that that is a big, bold wine. And this decanter is not quite big enough for what I want to do to that wine. But this will be perfect for the Mourvèdre. Now, once I put the wine in this decanter, it's going to start being in contact with oxygen. But I can encourage that oxygen contact by just letting it sit out for a longer amount of time and let the oxygen do its work while I go cook, while I go drink another wine, whatever. Or I can sit there and I can stir the wine. This is me deciding that I want to treat this wine like it's the ocean and there are tons of waves and we're getting like froth and bubbles in the wine. I want tons of oxygen interacting. So that's two ways you can use a decanter. There are other ways as well. First, if this is a light-bodied, delicate wine, when I pour this into the decanter to get it into contact, I can pour it just very delicately. And you see how I'm just inviting just a tad bit of oxygen there. I'm not really splashing the wine around. I'm not being vigorous with it. This is a very delicate treatment of this wine because I know that Mourvèdre has some delicacy. This is not a super bold wine. It's bigger than I expected, but it's not something that I really need to soften. I just want to discover what's in there. And I would stir it around just a little bit like this and then immediately put it in the glass. I think that's enough oxygen. But let's see. If you have a decanter and another glass at home, try this with me. So we've invited just a little bit of oxygen in. And as you pour this wine out into the glass, keep in mind that it is still getting in contact with oxygen. And in your glass, it's continuing to oxygenate. So now I have two versions of the same wine. And I had the power to make this wine. The winemakers made this wine so I could open it and drink it immediately. I had the power to make this happen. And that is through the way that I decant. And when I tasted this wine, what I decided needed to happen or what I wanted to discover about the wine. So in my mind, this wine probably has some delicacy. I'm expecting to get a lot more cherry and for the smokiness to kind of tone down. But let's see if I was right. I may have been totally wrong. It's floral now. And there's a kind of, I don't want this to sound weird, but honestly, there's a little Play-Doh in that, which is to me is a really pleasing smell. It's not anything chemical or unnatural. It's just, it's like wet clay. That's kind of what it smells like, which is not what I expected at all. I get that cherry, but it's a much less ripe cherry. It smells like a really fresh, tart cherry. And Mourvèdre is associated with violets, but I'm smelling rose in this instead. That's the flower that I'm getting off of this wine, and it's really, really subtle. I'd say this wine is more fruity and smoky than it is floral, which is something that I didn't expect. Now let's look for the desert sage and see if it's there. It is. It's in such a small amount, but I'm getting it. But when I was searching for that sage, I also started to notice other dried herbs. It's an herbaceous wine. But it's like bay leaf or something. And I definitely didn't notice that in this wine. This is super fruity. This is the straight out of the bottle wine. Super fruity, really jammy almost. And the smokiness is kind of toned down. And this is clay and earth and cherry. I still get the smokiness in this, but I'm starting to see other things. But I do think more can come out of this wine. And so this is when we get into, maybe I should have made the choice to really shake this wine up or stir it around or really splash it in the decanter. And that's a choice that I have after tasting this wine for the first time and the discovery I'm having with this. So we'll play around with this in just a little bit after I answer some questions to see if heavy decanting this would change anything for me. Is this changing anything for y'all? Oh my gosh. I love that decanted wine. The wine was really heavy and juicy when I first poured it out of the bottle, but after decanting it, it's really spreading across my mouth in a really velvety sort of way. I've really gotten to the texture of the wine by just decanting it really, really lightly. So to continue on with your question about the aerator versus decanter, John, with an aerator, you wouldn't have a choice of gentle decanting or heavy decanting. You just are aerating the wine by putting the aerator on top of the bottle and pouring it out. And whatever oxygen it gets in contact with is how much it is, which is great for just a medium amount of oxygen. But if you get a wine that's really, really tough and dense, like Tannat, which is highly tannic and highly pigmented and has a lot of tightness when it's young, aerating that wine might not be enough for that wine. You may want to aerate that wine and then pour it from the glass back into the bottle and then aerate it again, which I guess you could do, but that process is just a little bit easier with a decanter. And that's just my opinion. But does anyone have an opinion on that? Does anyone love their aerator? I assume there are many people who do. And don't let anyone tell you that you shouldn't be using a wine tool. If you love a wine tool, use it. I'm here to help you maximize with that wine tool and tell you that there are more ways than just one to use it. Decanters don't have a rule book when you purchase them. It's just a decanter, and you use the decanter as you think you should, but there is no right way. There is just experimentation and finding the way that works for you. Okay. Who had some questions? Mona, you've heard several pronunciations of this wine, and that will always happen with wine because it's grown on a global scale. Many grapes have hundreds of different names. Tempranillo is one that has so many different names depending on where it's grown, like Tintafino and a bunch of others. Mourvèdre is known as mostly Monastrell, Mourvèdre, and Mataro, if it's grown in Australia or California, actually. We choose to call it Mourvèdre because we're growing it and making the wine in a very European style. So they have a lot more similarities than, say, a Spanish style or an Australian style of Mourvèdre. But the proper way to say that word would be very French, and it is Mourvèdre, which is, I know that's a butchering. No one hate me for that. I am American, and so here I've heard it Mourvèdre, Mourvèdre. I've heard it Mourvèdre. And if I'm in the mood to do a little like flair on the R, I'll go a little bit closer to the French pronunciation of Mourvèdre. But it is just straight up a difficult word for some of us to say. So you will hear many pronunciations, and we will likely never align on one single pronunciation for any wine for that matter. Kirsten, yes. So the problem that she has with Mourvèdre is that it doesn't fit into the wine rack. And she asks, why the large bottle? The large bottle that we use for Mourvèdre is because this is our signature grape. This is known as a Burgundian style of bottle. It has a lot of respect around the wine world. It is the bottle of choice for many wines, including some sparkling wines. This is something that likely won't change, but there are many, many wine racks out there that are meant to fit Burgundy style and champagne bottles. So I would recommend finding one of those or tucking these under your bed. Which is what I do. Find the darkest room in your house that doesn't change temperature that much, but stays relatively cool and doesn't let a lot of light in. And that's generally the best place to store the wine bottles that just don't fit into the rest of your life. And that way you can store Magnum bottles, champagne, a little bit of Burgundy, a little bit of Mourvèdre, and then you just have this cool spot in your house where all of your secret bottles go. And I call them my most prized bottles, and Mourvèdre from William Chris Vineyards is always one of my most prized. But yes, you'll see many bottle sizes with William Chris to help you figure out what is a standout amongst our collection. Mona, is there a preferred label? And I assume you mean, do I prefer a certain Mourvèdre that we make? Because many of you may know we do Mourvèdre blends from the Texas High Plains, Texas Hill Country, all of Texas, but we also do single vineyard expressions of Mourvèdre. So you will also see Mourvèdre from Bingham Family Vineyards, which I know one of you is drinking. There's also a Mourvèdre from La Pradera Vineyards. And I do not have a preference. I prefer to be an equal opportunity drinker and taste and enjoy whatever is put in front of me to its full potential. And I like the discovery of it. I would never, ever be a desert island wine person where there's only one wine I could drink for the rest of my life. I would choose one if I was forced to, but I would hate to be put in that situation. Mike, you enjoy how it's drinking from the decanter. Didn't it change so much? I think it's interesting the texture of the wine changed, but that is the power of oxygen in wine. Carrie, you also got rose. That's awesome. I love that floral aspect. And again, these glasses are all about accentuating those big aromas, because look at how tall this glass is. There is a lot of aroma that's filling this wine. Lane is remembering Dee, who was director of education at William Chris Vineyards for a while. And when I met Dee, I worked at William Chris Vineyards for a while to learn from him. And I loved his classes, but he does this aerating in your mouth thing, which you see sommeliers do. And it goes a little like this. I can't do it very well because I start choking on the wine, but theoretically that does something as well. I prefer to do my aerating with the decanter so that when I taste the wine, I don't actually accidentally spit the wine everywhere or choke on it. But yeah, a lot of people are really big on that process because you smell wine in your mouth actually retronasally because your nose and your mouth cavities are connected to each other. So it does potentially do something, but I just find myself giggling about it and not even thinking about what I'm tasting after that. If it does something for you, by all means, please do it. All right. I might have some more questions, but I'm going to continue on with our third Mourvèdre, which is going to be the same Mourvèdre, double decanted. So to answer the questions I know that are popping into your mind right now, there is no limit to the amount of times you can decant a wine. There is, however, a limit to the amount of times you probably should decant a wine. I think after 4 times, your wine, no matter how big and bold it is, it's probably already dead. So double decanting is what I commonly do. If I have a decanter and I know that this wine changed after I decanted it once, but I want to see how much further it can go, you can double decant your wine. And there are a couple different ways to do this. There's no one size fits all. If any of you were a part of Summer Sippin' last year, I used to have a plate that sat on top of this where I would pour the wine and it would kind of swirl around and then go into the decanter itself. That broke and was discontinued. So now I'm a little bit more creative with my double decanting. You can have a second decanter that you use, or you can do this and if I had the second decanter, I would pour it in here and then pour this into that. And that is decanting once and then decanting twice. Or you can, and this is the way that I most commonly do it, is you can pour all of the wine into the decanter and then pour it back into the bottle. And you're just passing the wine through oxygen in the air twice instead of once. But today we'll do it with my second decanter since I have one. I suppose you could also do this with the glass. You could pour it in the glass and then pour it into the decanter, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I'm introducing oxygen into this wine by pouring it in here. I think that's enough, huh? And then I'm going to pour it into here. But this time, instead of doing that gentle decant that I did where I did this, I'm going to really splash it around, and I'm going to make a waterfall with this so that it's going to hit this side of the decanter and spread out over the entire bottom. So my aim here is to spread this wine out as much as possible. Look at how much waterfall I'm getting. That is so much more oxygen than I got the first time. And this is where you have the power. If you're decanting your wine once, but you want a lot of oxygen, you don't want to pour it back into the bottle, but you want to really jostle the wine and get it in contact, all you have to do is pour it on the outside instead of gently directly down the neck. I hope that made sense. But I hope you saw how much more oxygen got in contact with the wine. This is why decanting is not one size fits all. There are so many different ways to do this. And then on top of this, I can also swirl the wine, which I think I'm going to do. Oxygenate, oxygenate, and I'm going to pour it immediately into the glass. Now that I've gotten so much oxygen in contact with this wine, the flavor compounds should be really blowing up and really activated. And I will start to notice the most delicate aromas of the wine, and anything that was hiding underneath that ripe cherry note, the smoke, the chocolate, the sage may come out a little bit more. Anything that was hiding underneath is what I'll see now. And I'm really interested to see what happened to the texture of this wine. And I expect that the texture would have expanded even more. So the wine will be softer. The wine will have uncovered some other flavors, and I expect the smokiness to have really, really settled down and for the wine to be ultimately less edgy. Because when you're decanting a wine, when you're inviting oxygen into the wine, ultimately what we're doing with this process is softening the wine. We're softening it and allowing it to fill our palate even more to have more discovery of the wine. If the wine is soft in the beginning, you don't need to decant it, is another way to say that. Let me know if you have any questions about that, and I will continue to explain. But let's see what happened to this wine. I'm so excited. Oh my gosh, I don't even have to stick my nose in this anymore. I can smell it out here. It is such a perfumey wine. I get that wet clay and Play-Doh thing even more. But otherwise, everything's kind of mellowed together and blended together. And it's just a really pleasing smell where I'm not picking out individual things so much anymore. It's just a pleasing, calming smell. It's a little like incense where it fills the room, but you don't necessarily pick out specific compounds from it. The smokiness has really integrated. So before, when I was saying that there's cherry and there's smoke and there's chocolate, it was all very separate from each other. And the smokiness felt like it was on the outside of the wine. It was a separate aroma and flavor. This is like smoked cherries that have been smoked with some sage and rose in a pot together for a while. And then they were muddled and then ate them. So in this way, we're helping the wine integrate, which is ultimately what happens with a wine bottle over time. As you're aging wine, all the flavor compounds are softening and integrating together, and they're becoming more intricate compounds in this glass. And that's what we're capturing with this white bowl. But let's taste. Oh, that's so pleasant. You know what's come out is the dryness of the wine. This is the driest the wine has been. Before, it was really unctuous and it kind of filled my whole palate and was really velvety. Now it like waterfalls across my palate. And then as soon as I swallow it, I'm getting the dryness of the wine. The tannin is there. And now I would want a little bit of saltiness or something fatty, like a little piece of cheese to go along with this wine. So if you did this experiment with me, or if you heard my descriptions, tell me which one you would have preferred. Do you like your wines really bold and fruity and smoky? Or do you like them to be really lovely in texture? Do you like that little hint of sage and rose? Or do you like it this way, where the wine is broad, everything's intricate, but you don't have to think too much about the wine, and it begs for a little something salty at the end? And I think everyone should pick something different, because again, there's no right way to do this. It is all to your preference. And we said this last week, The wine is part what the winemaker and the wine growers made it, and part how you treat it and how you react to the wine. All right, I'm going to go to the comments and see if there were any questions on that. Tabitha, yes, great points. Tabitha says she loves the aerator because it's easy to travel with, and that's a great reason to use an aerator instead of a decanter. I travel with my decanter, and I can tell you it's a pain. It's a pain, but I do it anyway because I love my decanter. I just love the act of decanting. I think there are 3 reasons that you decant wine. One is to separate sediment, which happens with old wines, so that you can see the sediment and make sure that it doesn't mix with the wine. The second way is to make the flavor compounds expand and become more intricate and to soften the wine. And the third reason is really just to show off. And the third reason is what I do. I love to show off with my decanter and have it on a table. I think it looks so beautiful on a table with a bunch of food. And I think the reason I love it is because I don't know if my family decants a lot of their wines. I don't think they do. I've got them decanters, but when they come in and I have a decanter on the table, I feel like they think the wine is fancy or the wine is more special because it's there. Maybe that's just me. But this wine is special because it can be decanted. It can stand the oxygen. Kelly decanted her Tannat today and said the sharpness went out of the wine and made it softer. That's the whole reason we decant. And that's a good reason why a Tannat straight out of the bottle is food friendly. It needs some food in order to relax. But if you decant that Tannat, that is a wine, Julie, that you would not necessarily need food to pair with. Decant it, and then it's balanced in itself. It doesn't need food. Kelly discovered strawberry in her wine after decanting it, which is cool. So the cherry went away. Mary's asking if you still get all the same flavors if you use a Yeti wine glass that's metal instead of glass. You wouldn't get the same flavors, no. And I'm not saying that there's a good or a bad to that, but these glasses are crystal and they're made to diffuse aromas at a scientific rate. They're made to maximize them. The bowl of the glass is made wide to expand flavor compounds, and the small rim at the top is to help them not escape. I mean, there's a lot of science behind these glasses and the material used for it. So there has to be a difference, of course. Now, whether that is a perceptible difference to me or to you or whoever else, depending on how they're reacting to wine, or how much they know about it, I don't know if there's a best way. I use a Yeti wine glass and it's never made me mad at it before. I've still enjoyed the wine each way. I think it depends what you're doing. If you're really wanting to sit and think about the wine, I would recommend using a crystal glass, and you can get them for $30 a glass and up. And then any other time, if you're not thinking about the wine too much, throw it in whatever vessel you want and just drink it and enjoy it. Thanks for being so active in the comments today. Kara asked, are there some varieties that enjoy being decanted more than others, or is it personal preference? Yes, absolutely, it's personal preference. It's just like saying white wine should be chilled, but that's really a personal preference. I can recommend that white wine be chilled all day, but the fact is that I prefer my white wines less chilled than other people. So personal preference, yes, but also your most tannic grape varieties are the ones that are going to prefer decanting, because decanting softens the wine, and tannin is a particularly harsh thing about wine that dries your mouth out. To soften those tannins so that you can discover more about the wine, decanting is generally what we do. And those are the wines that can use a little time in the decanter. And Tannat is a great example. That's just the example we're going to use all day today. Tannat is a great example because the name Tannat literally stands for tannin, because it's one of the most highly tannic grapes out there, along with grapes like Sagrantino. Cabernet Sauvignon is up there. Those really tannic grape varieties can use some decanting just to relax the tannins a bit. The tannins won't go away. They'll still be there, but they'll be maybe more pleasing. But again, it's personal preference. Some people like that really impactful, dry tannin. and decanting it will make the tannins less perceived. So if you love that tannin, if you love to just chew through your wines, then you probably wouldn't want it decanted. But I hope that helped. Tracy likes the single decant. Stick to it. Don't let me change the way you do wine. I'm just helping you make maybe more decisions that you've never thought of. Awesome. I have a lot of comments to go through, and I probably won't get them all today, which is why you should join me next week for our third fall semester wine school, where we will be drinking another Lost Draw Cellars wine. This is the 2020 Syrah from Alta Loma Vineyard. Guys, I love this wine. And again, I picked this wine pack for us, and it's a collection of all the wines that either I haven't tried before, but I've been really excited to try, and I want to try them with you guys, or wines that I know I love and I've just been waiting to get back to again. Every time I drink these wines, I discover something new. And as I talk about them and as I go back to why we decant in the first place, it helps me unlock that much more about wine. So again, all of this education is just to help us continue on a longer educational wine journey and to help hopefully make the next glass that much better. So next week, I'm not sure what we'll be talking about yet, and I won't give it away. I have some ideas, but always let me know in the comments if there's something you want to be talking about or if there's questions that you had. And if you're watching this back recorded, keep on posting in the comments. I always check back to see if I can answer something for you in the next class. The final thing I'm going to put in the comments are tickets to the Texas Wine Month dinner. It's Texas Wine Month, which means everything that we're drinking in these deserves that much more of a celebration. We say yay for the sage and the cherry and the Mourvèdre and the Tannat and the fact that we love decanting these wines and treating them a different way because they're spectacular and beautiful, because the terrain of Texas is tough, but so rewarding if you are growing in it. So I'm going to post tickets. There are two dinners. One is tomorrow, and if you'd love to buy tickets tonight and join us tomorrow, please by all means do. And the next one is next Friday, but it's a multi-course dinner provided by our amazing culinary team. And I am not going to lie, the dinners that I've had at William Chris and Lost Draw Cellars, the food that I've had there is some of the best food I've ever had. And I know I'm basically paid to say that, but it is true. I would not lie to you guys. I hope that I get to see some of y'all there. I'm going to post these in the comments. Let me know if you have any other questions, and then we're going to hop off for the night. I will try not to go over on these every single time, but y'all know I love talking about wine. All right, so those were for the first Texas Wine Month dinner and the second one next week. I hope you join. The tickets are $150 per person. And you get, I think it's 5 or 6 courses plus amazing wine. And at the Texas Wine Month dinners, they absolutely pull out the best back vintage wines that I can't even get access to. So go there and drink the best wine that you've ever had. All right. So with those in the comments, next week I will have the next fall semester wine school packs selected. And we'll be talking about something really exciting. Enjoy the rest of your 2019 Mourvèdre from the Texas High Plains. And I'll be thinking of y'all and what we're going to talk about next week. Thanks for joining me again. I'll see y'all next time. Bye, guys.